Welcome to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Miley, an IFS-informed certified trauma recovery coach. This show features interviews from survivors all over the world as they share their impactful story of thriving in their post-traumatic growth. We explore resources, tools, and coping skills to support the trauma survivor community. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I am your host, Sarah Miley. I'm an IFS-informed trauma recovery and lifestyle design coach. I have with us today, Terry Tucker. Thank you so much for joining us. Terry is a speaker, an author, and an international podcast guest on the topics of motivation, mindset, and self-development. He has a business administrative degree from the Citadel, where he played NCAA Division I college basketball, and a master's degree from Boston University. Among his diverse professional roles, Terry has been a marketing exec, a hospital admin, a SWAT hostage negotiator, and for the past 12 years, he has been a cancer warrior. He is the author of the book Sustainable Excellence: 10 Principles to Leading an Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, and a featured author of the new book, Perspectives on Cancer: Stories of Healing, Hope, and Resilience. Terry, thank you so much for joining us here today. So your bio reads very similarly to me. We are clearly multi-potentialites. You have gone from NCAA D1 basketball player to SWAT team negotiator. What were they teaching you at BU and at the Citadel? How did you land in all of these multiple places and then now where you're at?
Yeah, there is a backstory, but first of all, let me say thank you for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you. Yeah, if you look at my resume, it kind of looks like a Super Bowl went off in the room. So understanding the backstory is this. So my grandfather, my dad's father, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954 and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle in 1933. And my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories that my grandmother told of that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after.
With a cat and a dog.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the life my father wanted me to lead. That's not the life I felt I was supposed to lead. So when I graduated from college, my father and my grandmother, who was living with us, were both dying of different forms of cancer. So I had a choice. I could have said, you know, I know you're dying, but sorry, I'm going to go blaze my own trail and do my own thing. Sure. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding the backstory, my first two jobs were in business. And then I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams. And honestly, Sarah, that's one of the things I'm probably most proud of in my life, is that I never let my dream die. I never let my purpose. I was a hospital administrator. I was making good money. It wasn't a very taxing job. And I was like, I could have stayed there and been very comfortable. But it was just, you would get up in the morning and it was like, yeah, I'm going to go do this, but it's not my purpose. It's not what I'm supposed to do. So at 37 years old, I made that shift and became a rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old to be getting into that line of work.
Wow, my goodness. And now you've landed to where you're at now. You are a motivational speaker, inspirational, international, bringing mindset and kind of personal development motivation to people. How did that develop for you?
I needed a purpose. I remember when my dad was dying. My dad had end-stage breast cancer back in the 1980s, and they really didn't know how to treat a man with breast cancer back then. And so they pretty much told him to go home and die. And he lived another 3.5 years, and I believe he did because he had a purpose. He was in real estate. He loved real estate. He actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, you know, well, when it's my time in the barrel, so to speak, I need to have that purpose. I need to have something to do. And, you know, I had spent most of my life being a physical person. I played college basketball. I was on the police department. I was on the SWAT team. And now I don't have a left leg and I'm in a wheelchair and I still have tumors in my lungs. So you have to find something that you can do that is purposeful. And we talk a lot of times about purpose in the singular, that it's one thing, that, we all have this purpose. And at least in my life, I find that word is plural, that its purpose is that, when I was younger, it was being an athlete, then it was getting into law enforcement. And now, in all honesty, as I'm probably coming towards the end of my life, my purpose has changed again. So I guess for your audience, I would say, yes, it would be great if your purpose could align with your job, but it doesn't have to. Your job could be over here. It's what you do to pay the bills, but your purpose is over here to be a coach, to be a podcast host, to paint, to write, whatever it is you feel is in your heart. And I'll end with this, especially when I talk to young people. I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think that your purpose might have an underlying current that doesn't necessarily change, right? Kindness or people, or some people have a passion for animals or the environment, but it's going to look different at different stages of your life, whether or not you have the responsibilities of children, whether or not you're partnered or not, whether or not you are wealthy or poor, right? Like those things are going to change. How it looks is going to change, right? And so I wholeheartedly agree with that. When you started down this cancer journey that's now been a 12 plus year battle for you, having watched your father and your grandmother, I imagine that was quite a taxing diagnosis for you to get. And now you've been battling multiple types of cancer, right? And this has gone on for so long. How is resiliency being threaded through there? What was that like when you got those diagnoses?
Yeah, when I was diagnosed back in 2012, I have a rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, affects the melon, the pigment in your skin. Mine appeared on the bottom of the feet, and it's the same kind, bottom of the feet, palms of the hands, and has nothing to do with sun exposure. And when I was diagnosed in 2012, I was told, you'll probably be dead in 2 years because we have nothing to offer you. We have surgery, but other than that, if it's not someplace we can cut it out, we have nothing for you. And I thought, well, you've given me a death sentence. Maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's really what I've been trying to do over these last 12 years. And resiliency is, my wife tells the story better than I do. When the doctor was going to tell me that, hey, you're probably going to be dead in 2 years, she pulled my wife out into the hall and said, look, I've got to tell him this. How is he going to react? And my wife kind of looked at her and laughed and said, oh, you have no idea who you're dealing with. You go tell him that and see what he does. It was just like, no, that's the great thing about doctors. I always say doctors are like Vegas. They play the odds. They say, okay, you're a person in this level of health with this stage of disease. Well, that equals you're going to live X number of years. Yeah. What the doctors don't know is you want to see your daughter graduate from high school, or you want to see your son graduate from college, or you want to walk your daughter down the aisle. What they don't know is your heart, your mind, and your soul. And those things are so much more powerful than your physical body is. Those things can overcome so much. So I don't put a lot of faith. I love doctors. They've helped me immensely. But at the same time, yeah, okay, fine. I'm going to be dead in 2 years. Well, here we are 12 years later, and I'm still here. And I am here for a purpose. There's absolutely a reason that I'm here and haven't decided, or haven't been told to move on and that kind of thing. So yeah, it really is, I hate it when they tell you that. They give you that odd. They don't know you. They don't know what's in your heart, your mind, and your soul. They don't know what you have coming up and that you're going to be there for. And it's amazing how much that causes you to continue to move forward.
I love that. And probably for you, I imagine it's been very difficult as this has been more and more physically debilitating for you since you were such an active person. And that's so important for you. So how has that been adjusting to kind of this more sedentary and physically uncomfortable situation?
Yeah, I think when you can't do what you're good at, you do what's important. And I really feel at this point in my life that this is not only purposeful for me, but important for people to hear. And I remember when I had my leg amputated and I found out I had tumors in my lungs, which I'm still being treated for. My doctor showed me my CAT scan. And I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan, but you can kind of look at it and be like, oh, it sure doesn't look like it belongs there. I had these big tumors in my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces of my lungs. I was coughing up green bloody phlegm. And I remember looking at my doctor and saying, how was I alive?
Right.
And Sarah, I'll never forget this. He put his head down. He shook his head no. And then he looked up at me and he said, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been. It said to me, God's not done with me yet. Where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying part of it. Absolutely spend more time focused on the living part and what I can contribute to help other people with whatever time I have left.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. When you can't do what you love, do what's important. That's a really beautiful way to think about it, because you might have some circumstances. It doesn't necessarily mean the amputation of your leg, so you can't be physically active as you like. It could be, a change in the stock market. It could be, a loss of a job. It could be, a parent gets sick and now you've got to move back to a different city to help take care of them. Your circumstances are always going to be changing because the world is just going to constantly be in flux. It just ebbs and flows. That's what it does. And so moving with I'm hearing that you're moving with your circumstances as they keep coming up. You just keep pivoting. So I love
do. With the one leg that I have left. Yes, absolutely.
you going around in circles and circles and circles. And I love that you made a joke, because in my head I wanted to laugh because I was thinking about the Friends episode with Ross and the pivot when they got
Yes.
I'm like, Sarah, stop saying pivot. My God, you're going to end up laughing at yourself. I love that. So your book, I want to go there for a second because I want to have, it's called Sustainable Excellence, right? And these are tools. These are like 10 principles. And if you can dive into just one, two, maybe three, and obviously I want people to get the book. But for trauma survivors listening, we're talking about excellence. You're talking about thriving. You're talking about living a life of joy and ease and abundance, which are words that I use all the time. You probably have your own words for it. But you're talking about not just surviving. You're talking about not just being here. You're actually moving forward, thrusting yourself into those joyful places of excellence. What are a couple of those principles that would be really useful for trauma survivors?
Sure. So, and I always talk about this one because I'm almost ashamed to say I've done this. I've done this plenty of times in my life, and I'm not necessarily proud of it. And the principle, and each principle is a chapter, or each chapter is a principle, depending on how you want to look at it, is this: most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds.
Yeah.
And I know I've done that. I know I've done that in my life where I wanted to start something, whether it was a project or business or something like that. And you sort of pull back and you're like, ooh, wait a minute. Maybe I don't have enough information, or maybe I'm not smart enough, or what will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. And I love the story. There's a man by the name of Jesse Itzler. And Jesse Itzler used to be part owner of the Atlanta Hawks in the National Basketball Association. He's married to a woman by the name of Sarah Blakely. Now, Sarah Blakely started a woman's undergarment company called Spanx.
Yeah.
And Itzler tells this story. He said she started that company with one prototype and $5,000. It's now a multi-million-dollar company. But his point of telling this story is, he said she'd been and this is hilarious, she'd been a facsimile, a fax salesman door to door. We don't even use faxes anymore. So that's how obsolete that is.
But for the children listening right now, anyone under the age of 30,
what's he talking
it was
about?
kind of like email, but physical, and it came out of a printer. Don't ask, just go Google it.
Exactly. But the point he was making with that story is that if she would have waited until everything was lined up perfect, until I had the marketing and the distribution and the supply and everything, he said, I guarantee somebody else would have come up with that idea and run with it. And so the point of that story is, wherever you are, just start, just jump in and figure it out. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up totally. And for all those young people who think that the road to success is like somehow people just show up there and they're successful, the road to success is paved with failure. Yeah. If you do not fail, you cannot be successful. And I'm not talking about failing just to fail. I'm talking about failing to learn something from that failure. And so one of those principles is just that, thinking with our fears and our insecurities. There's another principle about you are the person you're looking to become. I always felt I was a cop. even though I was working in the private sector and even though I was, suit and tie to, but I always felt I was that person. And so you can honor that. You can say, okay, I am this person. I'm going to get there eventually. Might take me a decade or 2 or 3 to get there. So understand you are that person you're looking to become. And then the last one I'll say is the most important principle is love is the most important word in any language. I remember when I was growing up, there was a basketball coach at UCLA by the name of John Wooden. And I loved Coach Wooden. I listened to everything he did. And I remember he was being interviewed by a reporter. And I was sitting there listening to the interview. I had a notebook and a pencil. And I was like, okay, coach, come on, give me some good X's and O's that I can use on the basketball court. And the reporter asked him, what's the one thing you want your players to understand or to learn while they're here? And he said, I want them to understand the importance of love. And I was like 13 years old. And I was like, no, we don't care about love. I want something that's you can use on the basketball court. But what he was saying was how important it is for all of us to love ourselves, to love, our families, our friends, what we do for a living. Love is the most important word in any language.
Yeah. I love that. And while you're talking, I'm thinking about maybe some survivors who are listening who are maybe in a bit of a darker place right now. They're kind of coming to terms with what has happened to them. Maybe they're struggling to just even get out of bed. The trauma healing work is really, really overwhelming for them. What would be maybe a step or two that they could take in the right direction here?
And I've been there. When I was diagnosed, they put me on a drug called interferon, which I took a weekly injection, and it gave me terrible flu-like symptoms. And literally, a good day sometimes was getting out of bed and making it to the couch. That was as good as it was going to get for me. And so I understand that. And I felt like, that there was sort of that living camp, and then there was the not dying camp. And I felt I was the not dying camp. That I remember praying. I'm like, look, God, take me out of this. I'm done. I'm not contributing anything to this life. I'm just taking from my family and friends. Get me out of here. But obviously he didn't. 12 years later, I am still here. So I would, I understand that. I've been in that situation where you just don't think you could go on. And so I'm going to tell you 2 things. One, I'm going to tell you a story that happened back in the 1950s. True story, happened at Johns Hopkins University. And this professor, maybe you've heard this, it was a professor who wanted to see, did an experiment with rats. He put rats in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he took those exact same rats and put them back in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours.
Wow.
Now think about that, 15 minutes. It's not like you're going to flunk a test or your business is going to go under. You're going to die. Your life is going to be over. And the second time, 60 hours, which taught me 2 things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives. If you know you're doing the right things, maybe not today, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year, but at some point in time, more than likely, nothing's 100%, you're going to get to where you want or need to be. And the second thing it taught me was just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. We quit, we give in. I mean, we all have a breaking point, don't get me wrong. Right. But I think that breaking point is so much further down the road because our mind is telling us, ooh, this hurts, this is uncomfortable, stop it, quit, give up. No, it's just like a marathon runner. Marathon runners talk about hitting that wall at some point where I can't go on, it's too much, it hurts. But they find if they can push through it, if they can endure that pain and keep moving forward, all of a sudden they get a second wind and they can keep going on. And the last thing I'll say about this is this, and I do this every day of my life, so I'm not suggesting something that I wouldn't do myself. I would suggest everybody out there, every day, do one thing that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that is potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters hit us in our life, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will have so much more resilience to handle those things when they present themselves.
Yeah, Very, very true. Yeah. Great advice. I love that. The resiliency that you're touching on there, and I know that that's part of the subtitle of the book that you're co-authoring, resiliency and hope being so paramount. Where does resiliency actually come from? Is it the support that's around you? Does it have to come from inside to really be true resiliency? Where do you find your sources of resiliency?
I really, I get my resiliency from what I call my 3 F's, which are faith, family, and friends.
Mm.
And, I have a very strong faith in God. We've had a long journey. I've yelled at him. I've been mad at him. Like, I don't get this. I'm upset. And we tend to think that prayer has to be our Father who art. No, there are times literally where I will just scream out God's name. Last time I was in treatment, I was feeling so lousy. I did that. And then I followed it up with, hey, and that was a prayer. So it was just kind of like, I figured, well, if you're the creator of the entire universe, you could probably handle me being a little upset and a little, hurting right now, and I need your help. Yeah. So prayer is very important. Faith is very important to me. I understand it's not for a lot of people, and I don't want to put my faith on anybody else. But the other part is family. Yeah. And I remember my doctor, when I had these tumors in my lungs, my doctor wanted to start me on chemotherapy. And I looked at him and I said, we're 8 years into this fight. Is it going to save my life? And he said, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I said, well, if the outcome is going to be exactly the same, whether I take chemo or I don't, I said, I don't want to do it, but I'll go home and talk to my family. And honestly, Sarah, this really happened this way. And it's kind of a funny story. So I get home and start telling my wife and daughter about what's going on. My daughter's immediately, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting, there's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that. So we sit around the kitchen table and individually talk about how we feel about me having chemotherapy. And then when we're done with that, my daughter's like, all right, just take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raised their hand. I'm like, wait a minute, am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? But I remembered when I was back in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we loved the most to class. Mm-hmm. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph, because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. Sure. So I took chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I love my wife and daughter more than I love myself. And in hindsight, it was the bridge that got me to the drug, the clinical trial drug I'm on now. So faith, family, and then friends. And I'll say this about friends. There were people that I was 100% sure that if anything bad happened to me, they would be there for me. Yeah. And quite a few of those people kind of backed away and said, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with you being a 51-year-old man that's going to die. I can't do it. And then there were people who I never expected to be there for me, who have never left my side in the last 12 years. So faith, family, and friends are really where I get my resiliency.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's always interesting too how people are able to show up, because they're going to do their very best for you, but sometimes that's not going to be enough for you, right? So someone going, I literally can't watch this. I've already watched too many people die. I just can't be there to watch this. I got to walk away. That's the best they can offer you. And it necessarily isn't what you're looking for or what's going to be best for you, but they're still doing their best. They're still living their best lives. And you cling to the people who can be there for you, who can hold that space, who can be, who can be that shoulder to cry on and to listen to, and to help you with these bigger decisions. So yeah, and it sounds like it was a great idea that your wife and your daughter had, because yeah, it really sustained you long enough until the next little bit of treatment comes through. So they had their gut instincts, and it was amazing that you were able to trust them in that and kind of put them first. I mean, we hear that a lot, trauma survivors, where it's like if they're at a really low, what they feel like is a rock bottom, and we hear this a lot with addiction as well. I'm not going to stop for myself, but for my kids, because they're like, mommy, what's wrong with you? Or daddy, why didn't you show up at school today? And it won't sustain you if you're really, really in the dark place, because we know that suicide does still happen. But when you're thinking about it and then you look at your children, a lot of times that will be a sustaining factor for you. So sustaining yourself in any way that's humanly possible, just to get to the next day that might be a little better, or in your case, to get to the next medicine that might be helpful or groundbreaking for you, that's all you can hope for in this world. And that's all we're doing. We're not guaranteed to get out of here alive, for sure, but you're still continuing on to live, because there's still that purpose and drive that you need to do for that. So Yeah, Terry, thank you so much for sharing your story, for being with us today and talking us through some of these really difficult conversations. I always like to ask, now you've listed a couple of great, really big resources for yourself, the 3 Fs I'll definitely list in the show notes, but was there maybe one or two more that were really helpful in your personal healing journey?
There's a quote that I absolutely love from Ernest Hemingway, one of our great writers, who in his book Farewell to Arms had this one line, and I absolutely love it. Whenever I'm really feeling kind of down in the dumps, I think about this. And the quote goes like this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places.
Yeah.
Just like if you were to break your arm or your leg and they would cast it and it would heal, that part that was broken would heal stronger. It would be stronger than the rest of your arm. You are like that as well. When life breaks you, and it breaks all of us, as you know, Sarah, we all go through tragedy, whether it's personal or somebody dies or whatever it ends up being, and we're down, we can't get up. Life breaks everybody. You can get up. You can continue to move on and understand that not only can you move on, but more than likely you will be stronger for what you went through.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. We're going to have that listed in the show notes below, as well as where everyone can find you. Tell us your website, your handles on social, where they can find your book, where they can reach out and get some more motivation and inspiration from you.
Yeah, Sustainable Excellence is available anywhere you can get a book online: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks. I have a website slash blog called Motivational Check. All my socials are on there. You can get access to them just leaving me a note. And I love having people reach out to me. And if as long as you do it in English, because that's the only language I speak. Some people reach out to me in other languages. I can't. I don't know. I'd love to respond to you, but I don't understand what you're saying to me. So I would love to do that. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Love that. We'll have that linked up below in the show notes. Terry, thank you so much. Keep doing this amazing motivational, inspirational work. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to or watching this episode of the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and follow. For any information that was discussed in this podcast episode, check out the show notes below. Until next time, be well.